Hey friends, tonight I'm going to tell you a true crime story. Gently, you settle into the quiet edge of your room, where the screen glows like a nightlight, and the world narrows to a voice, a timeline, and a town that never stopped asking why. Outside your window, there's a blur of street lamps and the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement, the kind of weather that makes memory feel closer than it should. This won't be loud. It won't be sensational. It will be careful, like tiptoeing over glass. So before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I like knowing our little constellation is real. Now, turn off the lights, switch on a fan for a soft hush of noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You step into Harbor's End, yes, that's what the maps call it. A coastal town that curls around a working pier like a comma. In the daylight, gulls skate the wind like white punctuation marks. At night, fog threads between the shingled roofs and the bait shop signs. You're not visiting. You're returning. The story lives here, in the way people lower their voices when the year 1998 comes up, in the way a certain corner on Alder Street feels colder than the rest of the block. You walk that street now in your mind, the boards underfoot carpenter squeaky, a bakery window bleeding warm light onto wet cement, the air smelling of coffee, yeast, and the metallic breath of the sea. You remember the flyer that seemed to cling to every bulletin board that autumn. A face framed by a wool hat, a smile that wasn't cautious enough for Harbor's End. And a missing date that arrived like a storm, the 3rd of October, 1998. Her name was Mara Lark, a part-time librarian's assistant and volunteer at the animal shelter, the kind of person who'd leave extra quarters in the copier for the next kid. You weren't friends, not really. But you once sat 2 seats over at a town meeting and watched her read with her finger under each line, as if her eyes liked to skateboard on the words. The last place anyone remembered seeing her was the pier, just past sundown, where the boats knock the pilings with the rhythm of a slow heart. You can hear that knock now, wooden and patient, as you lean against the railing in the memory's night. The lanterns swing, a fisherman coughs, a soda can rolls in a wind-stitched loop. It's not that the pier is haunted. It's that people carry their questions here, the way they carry tote bags and keys, and sometimes the questions snag on the splinters and stay. The police did what police did in the late 90 seconds. Canvassed, logged, and measured. A historical truth clicks into place in your thoughts. The FBI's National DNA Index, CODIS, had only been operational for a short time then, still stitching together state labs and federal channels. New method, old patience. Everyone hoped it would mean answers, but Harbor's End wasn't a lab. It was a place where evidence washed away with the tide, where memory was the real archive, messy and edited. There's a strange detail town kids still pass along, like a charm or a dare. On the night Mara vanished, the lighthouse usually steady blinked in irregular pattern, as if someone bigger than the Coast Guard were sending Morse code. An electrician blamed a faulty relay. An old-timer said the sea blinks back when it wants to. You don't know why that matters, only that it clings. A burr on the sweater of the mind. You drift to the library, where Mara's desk still stands in the local history room, the surface faded into a topography of coffee rings and pencil dents. You run a finger over the glass case that holds photographs of Harbor's End, in black and white, fishermen with salt stiff in their beards, school kids lined up like fence posts, and the 1,933 storm-dragging boats into Main Street like toys. Archivists would tell you that memory is a contested shoreline. There's an open academic debate, after all, about whether communities truly remember or simply rehearse the stories that knit them together. In Harbor's End, the rehearsal feels like prayer. You listen to the old floorboards. Click-clack under your shoes as you follow the shelves to the back door Mara used during smoke breaks. It opens to a thin alley that smells of damp cardboard and orange peels. Someone once found a button there that didn't match any jacket, a round matte green disc scored by a diagonal scratch. Police bagged it, tagged it, and filed it with a dozen other nothings that might someday be something. You pocket that detail, just in case. You cross town, because stories do. Miles collapsing into a block as you pass the Tomcat Diner, where ketchup bottles sweat in their red skins, and the waitress knows your order before you've decided you're hungry. You slide into a booth to listen. Harbor's End gossip has a hushed domestication to it, like house cats that still like the smell of rain. People talk about that autumn, about the new science that didn't help, about the vigil candles that left waxpox on the church steps, and about the dog from the shelter who refused to leave the bus stop where Mara would wave at him through the window. Someone says a thing you've heard 100 times. She must have known them. As if knowing is the same as safety. As if familiarity is a lock. You lift your cup, feel the heat bead against your lower lip, and let your eyes wander to the framed newspaper pages above the counter. The decade's triumphs, the Little League title, that time the mayor's tie fell into the ribbon-cutting cake. Another article from the larger world, one that doesn't belong to Harbor's End, mentions how in 1986, a British scientist named Alec Jeffreys developed DNA profiling, unspooling a new script from the body itself. It's comforting and cruel. That progress, comforting because it promises answers, cruel because it teaches towns like this to wait with a stopwatch in their hands for a test that might not run for decades. You leave a tip under the coffee saucer and walk back into the damp, cars wheezing past like tired seals. The pier lights show you again where the story inhales. There's a rhythm to unsolved things. People search, people settle, and then people surrender, just enough to go on. But you aren't surrendering tonight. You visit the old shelter where Mara kept lists of cat names neat as sheet music. The volunteer, now Liza, with the speckled glasses, tells you the oddest footnote. In the week before Mara vanished, a man no one recognized came by with a box of 20 blank library cards and asked if any of the cats had a habit of following strangers home. Who brings library cards to a shelter? Maybe someone who wanted to be known as a reader, a harmless ghost, or maybe no one at all, just the town projecting a story shape onto the fog. You hold the box in your head, shake it, and listen for a rattle. The cards don't clack, they're cardboard, after all, but the idea of them does. You picture names stamped into them, borrowed and returned, borrowed and never returned. The ocean breathes against the breakwater, and you think of how Harbor's End learned to narrate itself around a hollow. The PTA sold ribbon pins. The high school media class recorded interviews. A man who used to fix boat engines switched careers and became a cop. You catch yourself tracing circles on your palm with your thumb, the way Mara did with her finger under each line of print, the way people soothe themselves with loops and loops. The years pass in the way only stories can show, time-lapse ripples tugging at shop signs and repainting porches. You feel the town's calendar flip. New mayor, new kids, and a new flavor at the ice cream shop that tastes like a mistake, salted licorice swirl, and somehow it sticks. There's a festival added in June that sells seashell wind chimes, and the same band plays a Steely Dan cover that makes teenagers laugh until they like it. Every October 3, candles and chalk. Mara, come home. Then rain to blur it into a heart. You're walking the police station's hallway now, fluorescent lights buzzing like nervous bees. A corkboard still holds thumbtacked maps and the halo of holes where red thread used to connect dots. You search the faces of the old photos and realize, with a slow sinking tenderness, that many of the people who searched in 1998 are gone now. That too is part of the truth. Time drafts new investigators by making them neighbors first. A file, yes, that file sits in its honest beige folder. You ease it open and see notes about the pier, the alley, the diner, the shelter, the button with the diagonal scratch, the library cards, and the irregular lighthouse. You're not a detective. You're a listener. But listening changes rooms. You feel the story lean forward like a person who has something else to say. Here's a quiet hinge. One that squeaks only for those who stand close. A month ago. Don't jump ahead. Not yet. The case moved. Not because of a confession, not because of a witness, but because objects remember. A jacket nobody thought mattered coughed up a microscopic whisper in a lab a very long way from Harbor's End. That's a future thing. Tonight is about the town before the announcement, the air in the room the night before the headline that will make the pier feel like a stage again. You walk through that night so slowly, the fog seems to part for you, and you can hear your own shoes, the small comfort of rubber on board. You pause beside the lighthouse and listen for irregular blinking. It's steady, ordinary, and helpful. You smile at the myth and tuck it back into your pocket with the button and the blank library cards. The academic debate sidles in again. Does telling a story change it? Does shining a gentle light on grief make the shadows behave? You don't answer. You only breathe. And you let Harbor's End breathe with you. When you finally turn toward the dark water, you can almost make out a figure at the end of the pier. No, not a ghost, not even a person. Just the suggestion of an answer walking toward the town from some far place where samples and spreadsheets speak to each other. You stand there with the gulls and the damp and the hush of late, your mind ready to follow. The arrest isn't here yet, not in this hour of the story. But you can feel the town bracing, like a boat taking up its slack rope as a tide changes. You can feel your own heartbeat sink to the knocking pilings. And even as you soften your gaze, you keep looking, because that's what we do when we're finally close to the thing we thought we'd never touch. You take one last look at Alder Street, at the library's back door, at the diner's windows mirroring the dark like gentle eyes. Then you turn back to the beginning. The flyers, the button, the cards, the old floorboards, the hush, the way a town rehearses its memory until the stagehands find what's been hiding in the wings. And you say, softly, almost to yourself, that you're ready to follow where the next hour leads. The morning it happens, the fog pulls back slowly, like a curtain, unsure of the scene behind it. You're standing on the edge of Alder Street again, coffee in hand, the cup trembling faintly in your fingers. Harbor's End is awake, but something in its rhythm feels wrong. Doors open too early, blinds tilt halfway, and someone's left their radio on in the bakery, the announcer's voice cutting through the yeasty air like a blade of static. You don't catch every word at first, just arrest, 1,998 disappearance, and the name you've been holding under your tongue for years, Mara Lark. Your pulse finds a second heartbeat in your throat. You push the door open. A bell jingles too cheerfully for what's just been said. The baker pauses mid-icing, the air sweet and too thick to breathe. They got him, she whispers, though no one has yet said who. You don't ask. Not yet. You step back outside, into the thin coastal light that's already pulling the story apart and reassembling it into headlines. Down the street, the police station parking lot has filled faster than it ever did for town hall meetings. Vans marked with network logos, glossy, impatient, line the curb. Camera tripods sprout like metallic weeds, and voices murmur behind clipboards and coffee thermoses. Someone drops the word, cold case solved. Someone else says DNA match. You stop walking. The sound of seagulls feels wrong. Too sharp, too amused. Across the street, Mrs. Lark, Mara's mother, stands in her doorway, her white cardigan hanging like surrender. The crowd gives her space, as if grief is radioactive, but you can see the tremor in her jaw. She isn't crying. She's listening, waiting for the noise to translate into something she can hold. The official version unfolds in precise syllables. A 53-year-old man named Thomas Keene, a local handyman once known for repairing boat engines and fixing porch steps, was arrested at dawn in connection with Mara's disappearance. He'd lived 2 blocks from the pier all these years, quiet as a buoy in fog. The detectives mentioned new DNA evidence, processed through an updated database. You think about CODIS again, how it grew and learned, how the future reaches backward like a hand through water. It's almost impossible to picture Thomas Keene without the lens of what you've just heard. You remember him vaguely, his toolbox full of mismatched wrenches, the smell of turpentine following him like a second coat. He'd wave sometimes, the kind of wave that didn't wait to be returned. People called him steady, reliable, and maybe a little odd. But that word odd is the town's polite way of saying unreadable. You walk toward the pier because that's what instinct does. It retraces. The boards creak underfoot, the air sharp with salt. You imagine the morning the police came for him, the hush before the knock, the way neighbors pretended not to look while pretending even harder not to listen. Maybe his porch light was still on. Maybe he said something ordinary, like, "Can I feed my cat first?" You'll never know the small words, the domestic seconds around the moment history slipped its hand into the present. At the end of the pier, a tourist couple takes photos of the lighthouse. They don't know this is sacred ground. You close your eyes, and the wind slides past your ear like a whisper, too fast to catch. Harbor's End changes overnight. Reporters flock to Main Street like migrating birds. The Tomcat Diner runs out of coffee by 10 a.m. Someone paints Justice for Mara on the underpass in coral pink spray paint, because even outrage can be pretty here. The same journalists who can't pronounce Alder Street now speak of the shocking arrest and the quiet handyman with a dark secret. You feel both vindicated and violated, like a secret too long kept has finally been shouted, but through the wrong megaphone. Inside the library, the local history room hums with electricity. They've opened the old file again, spread it across the table where you once traced Mara's name. Photographs, receipts, sketches, pieces of time pinned flat. You recognize the button, the matte green one with the diagonal scratch. The detective handling it wears gloves, latex sighing against evidence. "It's the same residue found on her jacket," he says to someone else. "The one from the donation bin." You freeze. Donation bin? Here's the fact no one saw coming. Mara's old jacket had been anonymously donated to a thrift store 15 years ago. It sat in a box until the store closed during the pandemic cleanup. A volunteer sorting clothing for recycling noticed something hard sewn into the hem, a micro-pendant keychain no bigger than a thumbprint. Inside, the remnant of a single hair. When tested against the modern database, it hummed with the name Thomas Keene. You picture that jacket now, folded between corduroy blazers and forgotten prom dresses, the past waiting in cotton. The idea makes you dizzy. Time isn't linear. It's recursive. Objects keep breathing in silence until someone opens the box. By evening, the story has mutated. Social media says the handyman kept trophies. The town Facebook page fills with grainy photos of his house, each window now a portal of speculation. Someone claims they always knew. Another insists on his innocence. The comments multiply like barnacles. You scroll, your thumb a pendulum between curiosity and nausea. At the diner that night, conversation hovers like static. The baker sits beside the librarian, their shoulders touching in quiet solidarity. Across the booth, two teenagers film TikToks about the Harbor's End horror, their laughter uncomfortable, almost apologetic. You sip your coffee, burnt and thin, and listen to the background hum of disbelief turning into ritual. Then there's Liza, the shelter volunteer. She slides into your booth, eyes glassy from crying. "You remember those blank library cards?" she says. "They found the box in his attic." She lets the sentence hang, heavy and trembling. Each card had a date, not just Mara's, dates of other missing women across the coast, but only hers was marked with a check. Your stomach knots. You want to reject the image, to send it back into silence. But there it is, stark and simple. The cards weren't harmless. They were an index. You press your fingers against the table, feeling the wood grain like a heartbeat. Later, Walking home under a moon the color of old paper, you pass the churchyard where the vigil candles once stood. Now the steps are clean, the wax scrubbed away, but ghosts of the shapes linger a stain of devotion. You think about academic arguments over collective memory again. Some scholars say closure is a myth, that even solved crimes live on as symbolic fossils. Maybe they're right. You can feel the fossil forming in real time, the town hardening around its own story. A seagull screeches above, startling you back into your body. You breathe out and glance toward the harbor. Police lights flash faintly, washing the water in red and blue pulses. For a moment, the reflection looks like a heartbeat. 2 days later, the trial coverage begins. You watch from your couch, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of detergent and salt air. The prosecutor reads the charges, each word precise, cold as glass. Keene appears on the screen, older than your memory of him, his face sagging under the weight of time. He doesn't look monstrous. He looks small, tired, and almost breakable. You search his eyes for anything familiar, any flicker that might explain the unexplainable, but all you find is vacancy. Reporters dig up everything: his high school yearbook photo, his Navy discharge papers, and the rumor that he once built birdhouses for the community fair. They talk about the psychology of hidden predators, about quiet towns and the monsters they hide. You start to resent the word monster. It makes things too easy. It lets everyone else off the hook. That night, you walk to the pier again, driven by something wordless. The tide's out, the pilings glistening with seaweed and moonlight. You stand there, hands buried in your pockets, listening to the boards creak their old refrain. You wonder if the lighthouse still remembers blinking wrong all those years ago, or if that was just the town projecting meaning onto coincidence. The beam turns, clean and regular, sweeping you in its brief glow before moving on. You realize the debate you read once in a dusty anthology about whether retelling history through story heals or distorts has its answer here. It does both, healing and distortion, braided like rope. Across the water, someone shouts, maybe a fisherman, hauling late nets. The sound dissolves into fog. You think of Mara, of her careful way of reading, her neat handwriting, and her quiet kindness. You think of the years her name filled the silence between every conversation. You think of how, even now, the town will never stop being the place where that happened. Tomorrow, the news will move on, but tonight, you stay on the pier, breathing in the salt and damp wood and electric hum of a town learning how to exhale after holding its breath for 27 years. You whisper to the dark water, "We found him, but did we find her?" The waves answer, in language older than guilt, softer than forgiveness. And in that moment, the story you've carried begins to unspool, not ending exactly, but loosening, like a knot finally giving way. You wake to rain, not the gentle kind that hushes you back to sleep, but the sharp, rhythmic tapping that sounds like 1,000 fingers knocking to be let in. Harbor's End looks washed clean and blurred at once, storefronts sweating, droplets, sidewalks slick like old film. The trial is over. The verdict has been read. Guilty on all counts. And yet, the air doesn't smell like closure. It smells like salt and metal and unfinished sentences. You step outside anyway, because that's what the living do. After the storm, they go out and see what's left standing. The wind snags your jacket as you walk toward the edge of town, toward the lighthouse, where it all began, and, in some quiet symmetry, where it all has to end. On the corner, a boy no older than 12 is chalking something on the pavement, Mara's Light. Each letter curls in color, neon pink against gray. His mother calls from a car, but he keeps drawing until he's done. You watch him, your throat tightening. The gesture feels pure, untouched by the speculation that's poisoned so much else. Maybe that's what truth really looks like, not in the courtroom or the newsfeed, but in a kid's handprint on wet concrete. The news vans are gone. The journalists have moved on to newer tragedies. Only the locals remain, reclaiming their streets from satellite dishes and microphones. You pass the Tomcat Diner open again, windows fogged with steam and conversation. Inside, the regulars talk softer now. Not about guilt, not about evil, but about small things. Fishing permits, pie crusts, and whose kid made the honor roll. Healing, in its simplest disguise. But when you reach the pier, something still feels unsettled. The boards groan underfoot. The ropes creak like tired lungs. You lean on the railing and stare down into the water. It's gray-green and restless, hiding everything. You think about the evidence, the jacket, the keychain, the DNA, and about what the detective said after the verdict. We found the truth we could prove. You repeat that phrase in your head, feeling its cracks. The truth we could prove. It doesn't mean the whole truth. It never does. A seagull drifts by, crying like a hinge. You close your eyes. Behind your lids, the past flickers. Mara laughing at the shelter, her wool hat too big for her head. The lights of the Ferris wheel from the summer fair reflecting in her glasses. Her handwriting looping on a borrowed notepad. For a second, you can almost hear her voice, soft, distracted, and full of plans that never had a chance to grow up. Then, it's gone. The lighthouse beam sweeps over you, and for the first time in years, it stutters. Not broken, just a brief pulse, as if blinking in agreement. You laugh, under your breath. The sound, half disbelief, half release. Maybe it was always this simple. Maybe the town didn't need the cameras, or the science, or the legal paperwork. Maybe it just needed to look, really look, into its own reflection. You turn away from the water and start back toward town. Your shoes slap against the boards, each step a small echo of all the ones that came before. Along the road, the houses gleam wet and new again. Someone's wind chime tinkles softly. Somewhere, a radio plays a song that used to mean something. You breathe in deep, and for the first time in a long time, the air doesn't taste like grief, it tastes like rain. At the library, the local history room is empty. The display case that once held Mara's photo is being rearranged for a new exhibit, Harbor's End, Then and Now. You smile at the title. The librarian, Liza, catches your eye from behind the desk. "We're putting her story in the archives," she says. "Not hidden, just home." You nod. You help her lift the glass and slide the photograph inside. The smile in that picture doesn't look tragic anymore. It looks alive, forever caught in a moment, before everything went wrong. There's a pause between you. Then Liza says, "Did you know the boy drawing on the street earlier? He's Mara's nephew, moved back here last year." You blink. The world tilts a little. "No," you whisper. "I didn't." "Yeah," she says, smiling faintly. "He told me he wants to be a lighthouse keeper someday. Said he wants to make sure the lights never blink the wrong way again." You both stand there, silent, letting the thought settle. In that stillness, you realize the town isn't haunted anymore. It's inhabited. The ghosts have gone quiet, folded into memory, the way seafoam folds into the tide. Outside, the clouds begin to break. Shafts of sunlight pierce through, hitting the wet pavement like gold dust. You step out into it, eyes stinging. The world smells of renewal, salt, sugar, and rain. You think of all the debates about memory and narrative, whether stories preserve or distort, and you find your answer in the shimmer on the water. Maybe both are necessary. Maybe distortion is the only way we can hold pain without breaking. As you walk home, you pass the chalk drawing again. The words "Mara's light" are smudged now, rain melted into pastel rivers. You crouch down, dip your fingers into the colors, and let them streak your skin. It feels like a small baptism, messy, human, real. The town exhales. So do you. That night, before sleep, you sit by your window. The sea hums faintly in the distance. The fan purrs. The shadows stretch and yawn. You whisper to the dark, "We didn't just find him. We found ourselves." And the night, gentle as forgiveness, folds over Harbor's End like a blanket. Maybe someday we'll know the truth. But for now, sleep well. Now, let the story fade like mist, retreating into the ocean. You're still here, breathing softly, the rhythm of the sea echoing somewhere beneath your ribs. The room around you is quiet, only the hum of the fan and the slow inhale and exhale of the walls settling into night. Each sound is smaller now, softer. The world's edges blur, turning smooth and kind. You can almost feel the pier beneath your feet again, the boards warm from the day's sun, the wind cool on your face. There's no crowd here, no flashing lights, no questions. Just you, the salt air, and a horizon that doesn't demand to be explained. You picture the lighthouse beam sweeping slowly across the dark water. Its light doesn't chase shadows. It cradles them. It says, "You're seen, you're safe, you're home." Every turn of that light feels like a breath, steady, forgiving. You let your shoulders drop. The tension unwinds from your neck, like threads slipping free from a spool. The air feels thick, tender, and full of permission to rest. Somewhere, the rain is still falling, softer now, tracing its fingers along the windowsill. Each drop is a small punctuation mark in the lullaby of the night. You close your eyes. The sounds around you blend. The rain, the fan, and the echo of the ocean merge into one gentle, endless hush. Time flattens. The story dissolves. All that remains is calm, warmth, and a single whisper beneath it all. It's over. You can rest now. Maybe someday we'll know the truth. But for now, sleep well.